All right, on our next guest on the program today, we have somebody very interesting. She's somebody who's possibly given me sort of woman goals, if I can really call it that, because just so many hats she wears. She's not just a household name now because of Shark Tank, but she's also a very active marathon runner. She is a mom of two. She is a CEO, so she is one of the most inspiring people that you can find around. So joining me today, oh my God, and we are twinning. Good morning, Vineeta, and welcome to TVC. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ronald, and congratulations for the new format, the new show. Very excited to appear here in one of the first few episodes, and I hope we can make it count.
Yes, we must make it count, and I'm sure that's going to be the case. But let me sort of dive in a little bit and tell people, introduce people to a bit of your story as well. Yours is a story of a 23-year-old who decided not to take up a job where the package was only 1 CR, right? It wasn't much. You decided not to do that, and you said that I will go and be my own boss. How does a 23-year-old think like that? I want to understand what was going on in your brain at that point, and how did you have such massive self-belief?
Well, very honestly, Sonal, I don't think I understood how hard it's going to be. So if you ask me honestly, if I had known that it's a very honestly, Sonal, I don't think I understood how hard it's going to be. So if you ask me honestly, if I had known that it's a journey that's going to take like 20 years and it's going to be full of like a lot of failures, a lot of rejections, maybe I wouldn't have had the courage to do it. But you know, when you're 23, the good thing that happens is that there's a lot of bravado, and you have a lot of self-belief. And I just assume that it's going to be much easier to build your own business. But in hindsight, when I look back, I think no career is easy, whether you start your own business or you want to be world class in anything that you do. It does take 15, 20 years. It takes
Wow.
a lot of risks. It takes a lot of consistency and showing up every single day, even in the face of rejection, failure, and you know sometimes um, uh, a lot of stress around what the hell am I doing with my life. So I think I went through all of those journeys, but luckily most entrepreneurs have this bias for action where without really thinking about what the risks in this were, I jumped into it. And the first 7 years were really, really hard because it was one failure after another. And, you know, it's
Yeah.
something that they don't teach you at business school, like really how to run a business, because they can't. Every day is like a new story. But I think so, you know, I don't give myself a lot of credit for having the courage to start up back then because it wasn't thought through. But I do give myself credit for hanging in there for 17 years through those failures and showing up every single day for my consumers, even when there was no money left in the bank account and you know I didn't know how I would pay the next month's salaries. But even on those days, I showed up. And I think that's what really matters, just
Yeah.
showing up every day, decade after decade. And when you're in your 20s, you think 20 years is a long time. But actually, most careers get built if you want to do something world class over a 20-year period. And it's
Wow.
important to have that patience. And not just as an entrepreneur, but as anybody who's trying to be really good at something, it's important to stay consistent, be patient.
So yours is clearly a story of perseverance and grit, and that is now becoming a theme on TBC. We had Rohan Bopanna yesterday, and he also said it took him 20 years to become world #1, but he kept at it. He fought through age, he fought through a lot of challenges to ensure that he get there. But you know, this is what I hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about. They say that it is about showing up day after day. But can you share some tools, perhaps, on how exactly do you do it? Like, what's your pick me up? If I'm somebody who's starting up and I'm feeling really down and out, I feel this is it, I've hit rock bottom. Can you share with us what do you do at that moment?
Yeah. I think, when you're in your 20s, it's all about like milestones, right? You're really thinking about, oh, I'm going to get like my valuation's going to be this much. I'm going to get to 100 crore. I'm going to get to a bigger office. I'm going to get a big car. I'm going to, have a house. It's all about, you're thinking about milestones. But you realize eventually that it's actually, no matter how cliched it sounds, but it's really the journey that matters a lot more. And I think the only thing that as an entrepreneur you have to do, I don't think there is any other option, is to enjoy the journey and to be excited about the journey. And I really, reminded myself every day that this suffering, this pain, this rejection, this failure is all part of the plan. That's how it's meant to be. And I really fell in love with our consumers, with the products that I was creating, with the brand that I was building, with the India story, with the people I was working with. We have the pleasure of having 75% women who work at Sugar. And I was excited about
Beautiful.
that. And I didn't worry myself beyond a point about, the getting to the next milestone and, just getting to the next big zero in your top line, bottom line. And I just, those are important and you have to obviously speak about them at every board meeting. But unless you really
Very
truly
important.
enjoy the
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
and you really remind yourself that, it's at the end of the day, nobody gets happy because of X number of digits in their bank account, but they really get happy about, what they're building, what they're doing, and who they're doing it with. I could be grateful. And I was able to tell myself that, yeah, I mean, I might be in the, gutter right now, but I'm still looking at the stars. I have hope, I have optimism, I have a great team to work with. And, just those little bits of gratitude about how far I had come and just, enjoying the moments got me through those tough years. And
Celebrating small wins, I think that's really what a lot of people also identify with. I'm also a huge believer in celebrating these little things. That's what keeps you going. But, and kudos to you, by the way, for having over 70% workforce as women. So that's a good win as well. But your journey is also one where you've sort of flipped to the other side. Let's talk about Shark Tank now. You've become a household name because of that. You're helping other women entrepreneurs as well. But I've always been curious to know, as much as joy, I'm sure, as much as fame, as much as reach that you're getting with this show, what is the one thing that you guys don't enjoy?
yeah, so firstly, I do feel very grateful, since you spoke about women. If you see globally, less than 2.5% of the global capital goes to women-led businesses. It's a shame,
Yeah.
right? And on Shark Tank, more than 50% of the capital I invest goes to women founders. And I'm really proud of that because, at the end of the day, you to change the narrative, you have to start with yourself. So it is a huge privilege. And, even bigger than that, when I was growing up, there was a dearth of women role models. And I really believed for a few years in my life that to be a successful entrepreneur, I had to be a man because there weren't any women who were really doing this well. And now when I meet like 8-year-old girls at airports and malls, they come and tell me that they have the dream of becoming entrepreneurs. They have the ambition of creating the largest company in
Yeah.
the world,
Yeah.
and their moms are in agreement. And it's a very different world as far as
Yeah.
young girls and their ambition is concerned. And you're the mom of a 6-month-old little girl, so I'm
Yes.
sure for you also to think that your daughter is going to
Yeah.
grow up in a time where she thinks anything is possible. That's amazing, right? So
Yeah.
for me to be a part of that transition, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
The challenge that happens is that in India there is just so many people and there are lack of resources. So which is when the hustle starts. When the hustle starts, it means that you could be in a washroom at the airport and somebody can ask you for funding, right?
What?
And which you can be, all the time. Like I just, people assume that I'm just carrying like a ton of money with me, doling it out, which is not possible because at the end of the day, I have to prioritize allocation of resources, including time and money. And I feel that, the part that I don't like is having to say no so often to, requests, whether it's for capital or for mentorship. I really wish I could do more. But if I don't prioritize enough, then I wouldn't be doing justice to my own, business, family, and my investee companies, and which is why I have to say no a lot. So I think that's the part that I would say I don't enjoy as much.
But wait, hold on. You're saying people have actually done that? They've knocked your washroom door, caught you up on elevators and said, "Madam, I have this pitch, please hear me out."
No, when I bump into at public washrooms in a mall or at a airport, so many times, yeah. I mean, I've had people in elevators giving pictures. I've had people like in the middle of a run. I'm like, running in the morning, and I've had people come and give me a pitch. And I always, that's why whenever somebody comes, I first start with telling them that, I'm not doing too many deals outside of Shark Tank, because so that they don't, spend a lot of time and energy giving a big pitch. But yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah, but I keep thinking about it. This entire startup culture, it's not just a trend, it's a mindset that India is perhaps in, right now. The entire country, it's so nice to see girls and boys, young girls and boys saying it's not just doctors, engineers anymore, it's not just offbeat careers. We want to be our own boss. And that is what a lot of you and role models like you are really doing. So that's really, really lovely to see. But you talked about hustle culture. Now, this is something that also bothers me sometimes. We hear so much about the downside of the hustle culture. We are in this age when, thankfully, mental illness is being talked about so openly. And a lot of it perpetrating also on how just kids who are starting out in big companies or even in startups, etc., feel sometimes. Not to name someone and not to be generic, but we hear a lot of these stories, a lot of breakdowns happen, a lot of no balancing act really at home. What's your take on it, and what's our way out of it?
Yeah. So, firstly, I am a product of the millennial generation, and I did grow up, knowing that you can't control the outcome, but you can control the input, which
Same
is
here.
the kind of effort you put in, and hard work matters. So, I have always been a big believer of working hard and, working hard for your dreams. But many times, and which is hustle at the end of the day, and which is why hustle I always have used internally also as a very positive term, because it has empowered me for becoming who I am. And like I said, like the entrepreneur who like ask somebody in a washroom, for funding, you can call it hustle. You can call it not understanding the boundary, and you can, there can be a positive connotation or a negative connotation for it. But I feel that, in a lot of cases, when it's taken to extreme, it leads to an organization where there is a lack of respect for people. There is a lot of focus on things like FaceTime, where politics start coming in. It matters how many, how your perception of the effort that you're putting in rather than the actual effort. And I think that's where hustle can go from being a positive term to a negative term. So I feel that, rather than calling hustle, which I think is an empowering term, because at the end of the day, to do anything great, you have to hustle, you have to take risks, you have to take a chance, you have to pitch to somebody in a washroom somewhere. And I like to focus on the positives of hustle, which is working hard and taking risks. And but it has to be within, I think, with respect for other people, which means that when it goes towards becoming toxic in terms of an environment where people are not able to, take care of their health or their families for the sake of that hustle, then it's crossing the line. And I feel that as an organization, it's important to get the balance right.
Yeah.
And as an organization which has 75% women, I think a lot about getting that balance right, not just for myself, but for everybody who works here. And which is why it is, I ensure that there is a culture of output more than just input. But it's very rare to get output without the input, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, but very well said answer, very mature as well. We really hope other startups are also listening to this as we go around in the program. But you talked about balancing act, and I really want to know this. How are you managing this? You are a mom of two. You are a marathon runner, you are a CEO, you're now a judge on Shark Tank, you're mentoring other people. I mean, I'm going crazy with just one kid at home and this job. How are you doing this? How many PTAs have you missed, and where are you on the guilt trip journey?
Luckily, have just missed one PTA so far, which my husband managed to show up for. So between both of us, we're there. I think I do think that a lot of times women get more trapped in the whole guilt management rather than the time management zone. And I think I have figured over a period of time that the only way to deal with guilt is to is to remind yourself that you're doing the best that you can and not seek perfection. And I feel that a lot of what I do is possible because I have a lot of help, which means I don't do everything myself.
Yeah.
And I'm able to delegate both at home and at work because I'm not seeking perfection all the time. And I'm just, I'm trying to just enjoy the moment and the journey. And I feel that really being a mother makes me a better founder, and being a founder makes me a better mother. And which is why I'm very proud of both my roles, which is why I don't let that, which is how I don't let that guilt creep into my my mental mindset every day, because I think guilt is absolutely the one emotion that derails our journey of enjoying this phase. And I think over a period of time, with just getting enough help, managing my energy rather than my time, and not seeking perfection, I'm able to get by. But it's not easy. I don't claim to make it sound like it's easy. It's been hard. And I'm always learning, and I'm always talking to other founders and learning from their best practices. But I think one of the places where I've been super lucky is that like I mentioned earlier, I have a husband who puts in half
Yeah.
the work
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is a conversation which every woman needs to have, because the data says that in India, women are putting in 6 times more hours of unpaid domestic chores compared to men. And there is no way we can have equality at work if that ratio at home is 1:6.
Well said.
So
Well
I'm
said.
very
Yeah.
lucky, without having tough conversations. I have 50% support from my husband. But for all the women out there, I think whatever tough conversations it takes, it's important to make sure there is no perfect equation, but it's important to make sure that both the partners are putting in enough effort at home in raising children as well as taking care of domestic chores, because it's not a job that can be done. I mean, it's much harder for women when they have to do it by themselves.
Right. Such an inspiring conversation. I'm loving this, Vineeta. But I want to shift gears a little bit right now, and I want you to put on your CEO hat and tell me something, totally business related now. We're looking at 2024 very differently. It's a year when a lot of startups are hitting IPO. Everyone is looking at that with a bit of a caution. We know what happened with Paytm. We know what happened with the 2021 entire cycle. So how are you reading this trend? How are you looking at companies, startups like Farmeasy, Swiggy, Oyo, Ola Electric, all of them now in the fray to hit IPOs? What's the thing to watch out for here?
So in India, if you look at 2021, it was a year when there was almost more than 40 billion of private capital that was invested in startups. That number in 23 was down to 11 billion. So it's been much harder as far as private markets are concerned. Whereas if you look at public markets, I mean, the Sensex is, not showing any signs of going down. It's been phenomenal growth over the last 12 months, at about 73,000 now, if I'm not mistaken. And which also means that in public markets, companies are getting valued more than in private markets. And this is happening after a long time. In 2021, it was absolutely the other way. Whereas in 2024, there is suddenly public versus private market. The difference in the valuations is a lot for all types of businesses. So I think it's good for companies to go public because they're getting more value over there, and there is a lot more liquidity in public markets in the
Yeah.
moment. But yes, the fundamentals have become very important today, and I think that's very good because it's companies are being weighed on the basis of their bottom line. So all of the companies that you mentioned, it's important for them to either show profits or a road to profitability. Things which weren't spoken about earlier as far as startups were concerned, like working capital, cash flow, ROCE, which is return on the capital expenditure,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of that, those are becoming terms which are super critical even in the case of startups now. And the third is corporate governance. So, even startups are not getting the benefit of doubt saying that you're a smaller company. So you can avoid some of these corporate governance practices that make investors feel confident about the investment. SEBI is making sure that all of these companies that are filing a DRHP have to go through all the corporate governance guidelines that SEBI has. So I think there's a lot more pressure on boards and on these companies to do the right thing in terms of having a solid
You're
bottom
right.
line,
Yeah.
having solid fundamentals, and having corporate governance in place.
Yeah. I also think profitability along with predictability, along with the steady flow is what SEBI is also focusing on, and what a lot of startups now hitting IPO this year should be focusing on as well. And that's clearly what the street is sort of watching out for. But you said earlier that you don't see this funding winter going anywhere in 2024. You've said in earlier interviews that it's going to be much harder to raise money this year.
Yeah, private markets are still quite tough. And if anybody's, there are a lot of companies that are still not ready to list. And for them, the only option is to either figure out a way to generate cash flow from business or, raise in private markets at whatever valuation they get. So private market, like I said, we are sitting at one-fourth the kind of capital that was annually being deployed 3 years back. And this is not going to change anytime soon. So it is very important for companies to keep basics in mind first. Whatever valuation you're getting, as much as you can raise, because it's not that you can be hopeful that anything will change in the next 12 months. Secondly, there is entrepreneurs are always optimistic, but sometimes that optimism can borderline become delusional, where you start hoping that you're sitting on a 6 months runway
Yeah.
and that some capital will come in from somewhere and save you, because
Yeah.
that's not happening. And I'm seeing companies go down to the wire, which is very dangerous because then you are talking about jobs being put at risk. You're talking about your reputation being put at risk. And no
Vendors.
amount of optimism is worth putting, jobs and reputation at risk. So I think my other message is that, if unless you have an a signed agreement in hand, make sure that you have a 12 to 18 months runway. Just be absolutely paranoid in terms of cash flow, and just don't end up in a situation where you have to let down vendors and employees, because at the end of the day, that is what brings down the entire startup ecosystem. With so much difficulty, moms and dads are letting their kids join startups because they feel that it's not the scary super risky career anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can go back 5 years in time to that era where people would be like, whatever you do, don't join a startup.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there are a lot of companies that take these risks and have to let people go. So I think about it very, very cautiously when there is somebody else's job at stake, which is why make sure you have 12 to 18 months runway at least, so that you can go over this funding winter. Because to believe that this funding winter, as far as private markets are concerned, will get over anytime soon
Not
is
happening.
purely delusional, because I'm not seeing any signs of that happening.
You know, this is a very interesting conversation. I could just go on and on. I want to pick your brains about camaraderie with other women entrepreneurs and so on, but that's perhaps a story for another day. We have to conclude now, but every time a guest comes on Breakfast Club, we ask them about their morning mantra. What is it that they're doing the first thing in the morning? Is it coffee? Is it chai? Is it yoga? Is it meditation? Is it this really nice song that you wake up to? How does Vineeta wake up to be the boss lady that she is?
For me, after my black coffee in the morning, the go-to thing is always a workout because I do feel that just, taking that like 1 hour out for myself in the morning is the greatest gift that I can give to my family and to my workplace because it just makes me a much better mother and a much better CEO. And so for me, my morning mantra is making time for myself first thing in the morning before I make time for the rest of the world.
Yeah, center yourself before you can go and fix everything else around you. Thanks, Vineeta, so much. This was really, really lovely. This is just the kind of conversation we want to have every morning so that our days are also made. And hopefully, we'll do more of these in the days to come. Thanks so much for joining.